Good morning. I'm trying to answer the questions you put forward. Uh, can say that the brutal repression continues unabated. The last mass protest action in the capital resulted in one death and 89 wounded, some of them very serious. The success of the regime, that is the so-called security police, uh, detained 58 protesters, among them 20 under 18. Since the coup in October 25th, 2021, 94 protesters lost their lives. Over 88,000 were wounded, some of them very serious, and over 17,000 are detained. These figures are provided by the two medical organizations, that is the Sudanese Doctors Committee and the Socialist Doctors League. The figures do not include the thousands of victims in Darfur, where the civil war continues with hundreds killed and thousands displaced. The Sudanese Communist Party, is working hard together with the resistance committees, the Professional Alliance, and other civil and political organizations to reach an agreement soon on the charter that would include the program for the transitional period. However, the issues of wrenching power and overthrowing the present regime is high on the agenda of the opposition, especially what we call the radical forces within the opposition. While the mass protest demonstrations continue, linking the struggle to topple the junta with the other issues, including the soaring basic commodity prices, the demand for the release of political detainees, among others, preparations for the general strike and the civil disobedience are underway. What the Communist Party is trying to do now is not only to rebuild the broadest possible alliance or front, but at the same time to have the nucleus for the front, the major forces which fought against the regimes, the Muslim Brothers regime since 1989, and who continued after the beginning of the present uprising, uh, shouldering the responsibility of leading the struggle. This includes the professionals, include the working class, the peasantry, especially the students and women. In this process, young people from both sides, especially what we call kandakat, this is young girls and ladies, young women, played a major role in the struggle. Today, some of them are among the leading figures in the resistance movement, whether the resistance committees or in our party or other civil society organizations. Our main aim is to regroup these forces first. Second, to prepare for the general strike, political strike. What we mean by that is another process has started about a year or a year and a half ago, building the trade union organizations within the professionals, the working class, and the peasant union. The main aim of that is this would form the basis for launching protest actions on specific issues uh, regarding the main demands of the people. This would the tilt the balance of forces in the sense that trade unions would play are not only communist but will they play a role in defending the rights of the majority of the working people, and as such, new sections of the population will join the struggle. That's why building the trade union movement again and strengthening it is one of the main objectives of the Sudanese Communist Party as well as the other democratic and patriotic forces. Reaching that goal would mean creating the basis for the general political strike. Once this is launched, it will be coupled with calling for civil disobedience. That means to sever relations with the present regime, not to pay taxes, not to follow any of its laws till it is overthrown. In the meantime, wrenching power is not an easy issue. But as we have seen in the past and we are seeing it now, cracks in the wall of the army, especially within the lower ranks, young officers and soldiers, is being observed. Desertion from the army is one of the factual situations today, and that means the repressive organ of the state would be to some extent weakened, if not paralyzed, while launching the general strike and the civil disobedience. This is our answer to the question. On the second question, one can say that the resistance committees uh, started to appear around 2010. That is after the attempts by the regime to organize national elections, parliamentary elections, and presidential elections, promising that it will be fair and democratic. However, while the party was preparing to, and other parties, political parties, were preparing for the election, it became evident that everything would not be as promised by the Nefasha agreement of 205, which stipulates democratic and fair elections. The regime tried to manipulate the elections, which led to our party withdrawing from participation and declaring that the regime is illegal and shall fight to topple the regime. That was in 2010. Some of the political parties continue to have relations with the regime, and in the absence of any democratic organized forces at that time, especially trade unions were dissolved in the beginning of the regime. Trade unions organizations were also dissolved and brutally repressed. At the same time, the peasantry movement was at a loss. The Communist Party took the initiative of organizing people in the residential areas, in uh, public schools and universities, as well as places of work, under the slogan of resistance to the regime. That was in 2010, 2011. And this is how the resistance committees started to appear and to work among the people in the Sudan. But because of the repression, the resistance committees mainly became active within the residential area since that time till recently. The resistance committees, which is composed mainly of patriotic, democratic, and revolutionary forces, including the communists, became very active not only in the capital and main cities, but also in the countryside. And through the network established with the help of the party, the resistance committees managed to cover more or less most of the areas in the Sudan. That's why when conditions for the uprising were ripe, the resistance committees appeared as the main force in organizing the mass protest action. Of course, uh, some of the political parties rejoined the party just before the start of the uprising, like the Umma Party, the Sudanese Congress Party, and so on. But the resistance committees, since that time till now, are independent organizations, democratically run by its members, and taking its decisions in a more democratic manner. While the communists are members of this resistance committees, but we don't call them. They are not auxiliary bodies of the Communist Party. As I've stated earlier, we are trying now very hard together with them, the resistance committees, the coordinating coordinating leadership of the resistance committees and the professional trade unions, representatives of the working class, as well as the peasantry, the intelligentsia, the civil society organization to form the broadest possible front. At the same time, to compose what we call a unified leadership. And the third question, there were a lot of, let's say, initiatives around preparing documents and charters and programs on how to organize the resistance to the regime and how to prepare programs for the transitional period after overthrowing the present rule of the military. Among the main charters or the main programs proposed are the charter proposed by the resistance committees, on which all the forces within the resistance committees play their role in the formulation of the charter. One of the main aspects of this charter is to rectify the mistakes committed by the documents which were prepared by the Freedom and Change organization in 2019. In the sense, for example, regarding the power institutions or the government institutions. In that 2019 charter, it stipulated that the power is consisting from the sovereignty body, second, the executive government, and the legislative body. All of them were supposed to be appointed by the Freedom and Change organization. However, with the intervention of the, let's say, the Troika, the United States, including the United States administration, pushing the African Union and Ethiopia to play a mediating role, that resulted in the agreement to a partnership between the civilians and the military, which was refused by our party from the very beginning in April 2019. And since then, people start speaking about an alternative to the present to that partnership. And since then, many documents were circulated, and finally, the charter for the establishment of the People's Authority was proposed by the resistance committees, discussed by other political and civil sources, and it is now it is in the final stage of being launched. It tried to rectify, as I've said, the mistakes, for example, of this 2019 charter, in the sense that instead of having a political leadership appointing the Sovereignty Council and the executive government, this document stipulates the right that first we will start by creating the parliament. This is the legislative body. The legislative body is expected to be formed by the components of those who would approve the charter. The legislative body will then appoint a government as well as a sovereignty council, and this puts the what is lacking now, or what was lacking before, that the sovereignty council became so independent and through the presence of the military people managed to manipulate power, and actually the main power rests with them rather than the executive government. Until now, the legislative body was not formed, and that is one of the grave mistakes committed by the leadership of the Freedom. As I've stated earlier, there are two levels of our activities. First, it is what we call the strategic alliance and the tactical alliance. On the strategic alliance, we are working very hard to reorganize and remobilize the working class, the peasantry, and the intelligentsia, as well as the trade union movement, the youth and student organizations, and women. This strategic alliance, what we call the National Democratic Front, more or less is now being established. And it is supposed to be the basis on which we build the tactical uh, alliance. That is the most broad alliance, which might include political parties of different orientations, other forces who would like to join the struggle against the regime, which would agree to the program for the transitional period. In the meantime, as we stated earlier again, that the main objective of the broad alliance would be to prepare for the launching of the general political strike as well as the civil disobedience. What characterized the December uprising is that it was not only the people who were in the street or what we call the protesters, but it enjoyed the support of the silent majority of the Sudanese people, and that's why it helped a lot. Uh, that process was helped a lot by the direct and indirect involvement of the majority of the Sudanese people who are not members, either members or active uh, in the field of politics. And this is the only way, that is the only way forward for us now through building the trade union movement and mass organizations on the residential area, uh, the working places, as well as institution of learning, reaching every citizen on the Sudanese citizen, making his choice to be part of the opposition would help a lot to lead to the downfall of the regime. The second important issue around this is by doing this mass work through the tactical alliance, we open the way for cracks within the regime and possibility that some of the officers, especially low-ranking officers and soldiers, would join the opposition. This is our main role to topple and oppose the military rule. On the question number 5, of course, the United States and the United States administration and imperialism are playing a major role in trying not to abort or stop the uprising, but they are trying to make use of uh, certain forces within the opposition uh, trying to impose a kind of an agreement between sections of the army and sections of the opposition, which we term here as the soft landing process, which means by enlarging the social base of the regime through participation of some of the political parties as well as the armed groups, a broader a broader base for the regime will be established, but will keep the main aims of the previous regime, that is, the rule of the parasitic bourgeoisie, which protects the interests of the United States and other capitalist and imperialist forces. Uh, the U.S., I guess, verbally speaking, they speak about uh, human rights, support to the masses in Sudan. But in practical terms, their connections with the military, as well as with the reactionary right wing political parties, is very clear to see. And that's why, what we can, even today, after the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, we are seeing that the regime is wavering between the United States, Russia, China, the Troika, the European Union, etc. They are trying to find the best possible compromise with any of these forces so that they can be in power for as long as is possible. Unfortunately, the invasion of Ukraine has a very negative aspect on the struggle of the Sudanese people since it became the first topic in the political mass media. Second, is that it reduced the interest of the United Nations, especially on what is going on in the Sudan. And thirdly, it increased the possibility for the regime to find ways and means of contacting different conflicting and contradicting international forces like the United States, Russia, China, and the European Union, and making use of these contradictions in trying to prolong their stay in power and to continue to launch their brutal repression of the Sudanese people. Concerning Russia, first the Bashir or the previous regime during its last uh, 1.5 years when it felt the wrath of the United States and the European Union tried to find ways of courting Russia, or China was always in the Sudan, of course. But Russia was another force to which the regime tried to court and maintain new relations. It started by the first visit of an Arab leader to Syria under the auspices of Russia. Secondly, al Bashir himself went to Russia and promised, uh, agreed actually to establish a naval base on the Red Sea in the Sudan for Russia. And at the same time, yeah, they also reached an agreement for the presence of the Wagner thugs to be uh, to come to Sudan and help the regime to repress the growing mass movement. Today, it is the same. The deputy or the second man in the junta left to Russia, and it was during the beginning of the war or the invasion of Ukraine. He promised, first of all, he said Russia has every constitutional right to invade Ukraine, and at the same time, he sees that having Russia in the Red Sea or the naval base in the Sudan would help both sides. And that's why Sudan now being tossed between the United States influence, which they see the presence of Russia as threatening their presence in the Sudan and their interest in the Sudan, would also try to compromise. Briefly about the establishment of the Communist Party. The Sudanese Communist Party was established in 1946 through three main outlets. One is the influence of the uh, intellectuals or the Sudanese students who went to study abroad, both in England and in Egypt, and they returned to Sudan. They formed the first Marxist circles, and then some of them, led by the leader and founder of the Communist Party, Comrade Abdul Khalik Mahjoub, went to Adbara. This is the city, many of the working Sudan Railways, that is the working class. They stayed there for quite some time, and they managed to recruit leaders of the trade union movement and the working class to form the first Marxist cells in that city. The second is the influence of some of the British intellectuals, officers, and lecturers at the Khartoum uh, University College, who also helped to develop themselves within the student movement and lecturers at the college. And the third influence was direct, coming from those local forces who read about the Russian Revolution and the Bolshevik success in establishing the Soviet Union. All three joined together and formed the Communist Party, or what was called in 1946 the Sudanese National Liberation uh, Movement, which developed in 1953 to the Sudanese Communist Party. Since then, the party became the main force behind the new productive forces, uh, reorganizing the working class, the peasantry, the student movement, the women's movement, and the youth movement. During its history, it has been subject to repression. Actually, for the past 75 years of its existence, the party was only legal for 12 years. And this shows how the repression and undemocratic and illegal work of the party has hindered its development, this national development into a real force. Now, and I think during the struggle against the first dictatorship, second dictatorship, and the last dictatorship, the party has played a major role in toppling the two or three dictatorships, and now it enjoys uh, the support of the masses. Suffice to say that the slogan of the uprising, December uprising, this is freedom, peace, and justice, was the slogan of the Sixth Congress. Arab Emirates are working together to reach a kind of a settlement using certain political parties like the Umma Party, the Sudan Congress Party, the remnants of the armed groups, plus sections of the army, to form a new partnership between these forces to reach a settlement by which, uh, let me say, a semi democratic civil military regime would be established to abort the revolutionary process we are passing through, and at the same time to create a regime which are attached to international capital and succumbing to pressures of our neighbors, succumbing to these pressures in the sense uh, not to present an example, a democratic example that would attract the attention of the peoples in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the Arab Emirates. This political settlement, which is being hatched, is the alternative presented by the youth imperialism and their allies, be it in Europe or in the area. We are fighting against them, and we are sure uh, our people's resilience to face such conspiracies and defeat them. It's happened in the past and it's happening now, and we are sure about things uh, in defeating such schemes. In addition to that, we enjoy the support and solidarity of the democratic forces all over the world, and we hope your journal will contribute to the solidarity of the struggle of our people. Thank you.